excerpts from Basho. Well, anyways, like the famous poem we'll go over would be look at the meter of 575. I don't know. And you get the original Japanese, but anyways, breaking the silence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of an ancient pond. A frog jumped into water. A deep resonance. Breaking the silence of an ancient pond, a frog jumped into water. A deep resonance. That's 575. Even though it's actually in Japanese, but they translated it. The other classical meter is 57575. An example is, on a long spring day, when all is happily bathed in the peaceful sun, cherry blossoms alone fall, unwilling to stay. Seems they're unwilling. Huh. That's 57575. Who are these poets? Well, if we go past the introduction and we go to the poetry. Why is this one like Barbary? This one's a poem against the wood floor. I threw a silver glazed cup, breaking it to pieces. Look now, the slender curve of your sword half drawn. Here's a few poems somehow. They're like, I call them beach poems, because I had beach poems. I spent the afternoon at the beach. Over the darkened sea, only the voice of a flying duck is visible in soft white. The end of the year came while I was thus traveling here and there. With a hat on my head, I saw sandals on my feet. I met on the road the end of the year. Read that again. With a hat on my head and straw sandals on my feet, I met on the road the end of the year. Actually, I should just read the Weather Exposed Skeleton, just read the whole thing. But maybe I'll skip to this section and then read something else. I'm going to read from this is like a travel journal here, the records of a travel-worn satchel. In this mortal frame of mine, which is made of 100 bones and 9 orifices, there is something, and this something is called a windswept spirit, for lack of a better name. For it is much like a thin drapery that is torn and swept away at the slightest stir of the wind. This something in me took to writing poetry years ago, merely to amuse itself at first, but finally making it its lifelong business. Let's start that again. In this mortal frame of mine, which is made of 100 bones and 9 orifices, there is something, and something is called a windswept spirit, for lack of a better name. For it is much like a thin drapery that is drawn and swept away at the slightest stir of the wind. This something in me took to writing poetry years ago, merely to amuse itself at first, but finally making it its lifelong business. It must be admitted, however, that there were times when it sank into such dejection that it was almost ready to drop its pursuit, or again times when it was so puffed up with pride that it exulted in vain victories over the others. Indeed, ever since it began to write poetry, it has never found peace with itself, always wavering between doubts of one kind and another. At one time it wanted to gain security by entering the service of a court, or at another it wished to measure the depth of its ignorance by trying to be a scholar. But it was prevented from either because of its unquenchable love of poetry. The fact is, it knows no other art than the art of writing poetry, and therefore it hangs on to it more or less blindly. Sakyo, S-A-I-G-Y-O, Sakyo is in traditional poetry. Sogi, S-O-G-I, is in linked verse, and Sesu, who in painting, and Rikyu in tea ceremony, and indeed all who have achieved real excellence in any art possess one thing in common, that is, a mind to obey nature, to be one with nature throughout the 4 seasons of the year. Whatever such a mind sees as a flower, and whatever such a mind dreams of is the moon. It is only a barbarous mind that sees other than the flower, merely an animal mind that dreams of other than the moon. The first lesson for the artist is therefore to learn how to overcome such barbarism and animality, to follow nature, to be one with nature. It was early in October when the sky was terribly uncertain that I decided to set out on a journey. I could not help feeling vague misgivings about the future of my journey as I watched the falling leaves of autumn being carried away by the wind. Poem. From this day forth I shall be called a wanderer, leaving on a journey thus among the early showers. You will again sleep night after night, nestled among the flowers of Saskatchewan. The second of these poems was written to encourage me by Kotaro, a native of Iwaki, when he held a farewell party for me at the house of Kikaku. It is winter now, but when the spring comes, your bundle shall contain cherry blossoms of Yoshino. This poem was an extremely courteous gift of Lord Rosen. Other friends, relatives, students of mine followed his example by visiting me with poems and letters of farewell and sending me money for straw sandals so that I was spared the trouble of preparing my journey, which normally, it is said, takes as long as 3 months. In fact, everything I needed for my journey, the paper raincoat, the cotton stuff mantle, the hat, the stockings to keep me warm in the dead of winter, was given me by my friends, and as I was invited to parties on a boat and at my friend's house, and even at my own hermitage, I became used to the pomp and splendor of feasting unawares and almost fell a victim to the illusion that a man of importance was leaving on a journey. For time immemorial, the art of keeping diaries while on the road was popular among the people, and such great writers as Lord Ki, Komi, Cho Mi-ai, and the nun Butsu brought it to perfection. Later works are, by and large, little more than imitations of these great masters, and my pen, being weak in wisdom and unfavored by divine gift, strives to equal them, but in vain. It is easy enough to say, for example, that such and such a day was raining in the morning, but fine in the afternoon. But there was a pine tree at such and such place, and that the name of the river at a certain place was such and such. For these things are what everybody says in their diaries, although in fact they are not even worth mentioning unless there are fresh and arresting elements in them. The readers will find in my diary a random collection of what I have seen on the road, views somehow remaining in my heart, an isolated house in the mountains, or a lonely inn surrounded by the moor. For example, I jotted down these records with the hope that they might provide pleasant conversation among my readers, that they might be of some use to those who travel the same way. Nevertheless, I must admit that my records are little more than the babble of the intoxicated and rambling talk of the dreaming, and therefore my readers are kindly requested to take them as such. I stopped overnight at Narumi poem. The voices of plovers invite me to stare into the darkness of the starlit promontory.